want to go over there too, like a little star. All right, I'll do a little catwalk. Now, one thing I can promise you guys, and I do apologize now, is I'm not going to be anywhere as nearly entertaining as Richard, so forgive me for not having the fun jokes and the interaction. Like, I know that one day, hopefully, I'll develop like him back there. Thanks again, Richard. So again, thank you guys for joining us for just generator maintenance and operational guidance. I know this is for your water credit, so thank you for spending time here.
I didn't say it, but you can say it.
Yes.
There is that Wi-Fi internet thing, and I'll let you say that.
Sure. Wi-Fi internet thing, you're going to find that right here. It's just the Associated General Contractors Vermont Wireless Password Contractor, all lowercase. So if you need access to Wi-Fi, that's your password. I know the service out this way gets a little iffy if you have Verizon or anything like that. So regardless, without further ado, obviously thank you to the Associated General Contractors for having us, Vermont Rural Water Association, and obviously we have a guest from the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources that also helped us out today too. Without further ado, I'll start off with our first guest, Ted Fella, Class 4B Public Drinking Water System Operator. He's a drinking water community operations specialist from the Vermont Drinking Groundwater Protection. Ted, if you want to just wave your hand, perfect. He'll be up in a moment to talk about some state guidance. We have Jim Brockhausen, who's our owner from Brookfield Service right here in the white polo. Josh Zararski, he's our Chief Field Service Technician, Vermont TQP certified at Brookfield Service in the blue polo. Pretty easy to identify you guys. Thanks for coordinating. And myself, I'm the aftermarket sales guy. I think I've seen a couple of your faces, at least in Newport possibly. I think I've seen you before, Liz. But regardless, I am going around right now trying to talk about why we are the best for municipal and commercial sales and for our maintenance packages and for some of the newer technologies like the battery walls that are coming to light. I also want to give a special thanks to Allison Smith as well as Brad Roy from the Vermont Rural Water Association. We obviously wouldn't be here without them, so obviously thank you both very much for having us. Richard Wabi, who he didn't want to have a nice introduction from me apparently, but obviously from Associated General Contractors, and then for that entity for having us here today. Obviously, thank you for the space. A little bit about us, of course. Brookfield Service Generators. We sell, rent, and service top-of-line systems throughout Vermont, New England, and New York. Satisfied customers at the heart of all of our success. 40 years, in fact. Jim, when did you purchase the company, if you don't mind?
2006.
2006. So obviously, we still have a long-standing history of, primary ownership and making sure employees as well as our customers are hand in hand, coming both first, ensuring the growth of all of us. We also know here that 90% of our new sales are from referrals from happy customers, which is one of the reasons I know I got hired. We are trying to be a little more proactive in getting out there in front of the municipalities, but regardless, at the heart of our sales, 90% of it being referrals really shows that, hey, we are the primary person when it comes to, or primary party when it comes to new generators. A little more about us. All of our technicians that you'll be seeing are TQP certified by the state of Vermont. We are Northern New England's largest generator service fleet. Jim, we have a service fleet for the, at least for the certified technicians, of I believe about 9 guys, correct?
We have 12 certified generator technicians, and we have 5 licensed electricians, and we have 3 electrical apprentices who are on the way to get their licenses as well.
Perfect. So, we, again, we'll talk about it further. We have a full turnkey care, coming from, again, not just the technician side, the electrician side, as well as the office side as well too here. Around the clock, 7 days a week service, of course, as you, can imagine. But the main thing that makes us different is no answering machines, no voicemail, no kidding. We have real people on the line to get you up and running fast. We pride ourselves on minimum a 2-hour response time for our fleet, making sure that we are at your door when the disaster does strike. And again, a friendly voice talking to you, go through that, of course. Our average technician has 14 years of generator mechanic experience. I know Josh has been there since 2012, Josh? 2012. So he's one of our longer serving techs. But again, just to show we have the experience behind a lot of our jobs and setups that we do. Obviously, our techs are qualified for repairs on all 3 major components: the engine, switchgear, and generator. And as we'll talk further, a lot of the most places that small and one guy shops are not certified to handle the switchgear. And furthermore, I'm hearing stories about places, obviously Cat and Cummins, that are telling you guys we don't handle switchgear either, making you deal with your licensed electrician, which again just makes things a little more crowded in the long run for your planning. We make sure, again, employees at the heart of our business. We know that, and each tech will average 40 hours of education annually. Josh, I know you were recently out in Wisconsin at the Kohler plant. We sent a couple other guys out to Wisconsin for Kohler training on some of their larger megawatt systems. I know Jim and a couple other guys got to go down to Cancun for what was apparently a meeting, but we all know they were having a couple and really talking about business and who golfs the best, right? And obviously, we're authorized for labor intersections in the state of Vermont. We also have Texas members of EGSA and FPA. Some of our past performance, and again, which makes us the most trusted company in Vermont, we're currently working with Red Cross, who we visit once a month to test their systems. We are still currently working with Burlington Public Works, University of Vermont, Green Mountain Power, Vermont State Police, Stowe, Verizon we had a contract with in the past, but they like to kick us around, and unfortunately Verizon's big enough they can do that to guys like us, so we said no. And we used to work with the city of Montpelier, Vermont, but that contract has since lapsed, and I cannot imagine if they're working with someone local or not. But again, just some estimates that we have last year during the storm. One thing that I think was really important, and obviously part of the reason why this class is so attended, especially in the recent week, power outages are becoming are occurring more than ever, whether it be from heavy rain, winter storms, emergencies, all three at the same time. We realize that this is a real fault in our system, and our grid is really not prepared right now to handle a massive outage were it to happen. The state of the U.S. power grid is precarious, said Stephen Flynn from Global Resilience Institute at Northeastern University. Avoid generator set failures at critical times of, again, whether it be all three of these or one or the other. Again, I think last week was a real testament to the importance of our systems being up and running when they need to run. And again, a little bit about those recent disasters, but the first I want to start off with, I know some of you guys are younger, probably, honestly, my age, about 29, 30. Hurricane Irene was when I was in high school. I was mad because I couldn't go to a couple soccer games that got canceled for preseason, and being the senior I was, that pisses you off. But obviously, families and municipalities were out power for weeks, and a lot of places in New York, where I'm from, if you didn't have a generator system, you didn't have power for up to 2 weeks because NYSEG honestly completely dropped the ball, for lack of better terms. With the winter storm of March of 2017, I can remember driving back from Plattsburgh, New York to Willsboro, New York, which is about a half-hour drive on a good day. It took me an hour and a half, 3 feet of snow, and again, power was out for a lot of these municipalities for over 3-4 days. And again, 3 feet of snow burying northern New York, Vermont. And forgive me for not knowing exactly how much some areas, maybe Irisburg, John, and some of the areas up in the Northeast Kingdom got, but it was pretty devastating over this way. As well, last year, the flooding summer 2023, which is what these pictures are from here, flooding we haven't seen since over 100 years. We had loss of life, which in Vermont terms is honestly devastating and unheard of, really. And Montpelier and Barre are devastated. I know for a fact we currently have still our rental units sitting in downtown Montpelier as they're doing some the renovations, obviously, to the base levels. It's just really devastating that almost a year later they had a similar situation, which fortunately I know, unlike a lot of areas in Vermont, Montpelier was spared. And obviously that leads me into the flooding last week of July 2024. A reminder these events are becoming all too common, and unfortunately from what I'm seeing, it's been 3 people who have lost their lives, including the gentleman from New York. I know Irisburg, John, how do you guys have a pretty devastating situation up there?
Not really.
Not really?
We had
Okay.
water running down the road, but
Yeah.
basically, nothing.
Is anyone from Lindenville Hill or anywhere up the area that live that way? Or maybe Plainfield, for example? Are you from Plainfield? How horrible. I mean, I don't mean to put the spotlight on you, my friend, but God bless not having,
Yeah, they probably work from Montpelier, but Plainfield will get hurt. Their water, wastewater system, rural water is really supporting them to get them back up and running.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully this.
Lost a lot of bridges, a lot of access.
Yeah. And obviously, as I think the article came out from Vermont Digger, $30 million of damage, and unfortunately, they don't have much money on hand to, even pay for a contractor to come in and put the gravel down. And again, I mean, I think that's a testament to, preparation overall, but obviously it can show how critical, again, if there is a disaster situation is. I would like to have a little test here. The U.S. Department of Energy came out this year with a statistic ranking Vermont in terms of state grid reliability. Does anyone know what number that was? Any guesses? I got a free T-shirt if someone wants to take a wild guess for you. 25th. Anything better? 40? 49th. There you are, my friend. 49th. And again, Ted's going to talk about how, Green Mountain Power is a reliable source, and, in standards, they're wonderful to work with. But when it comes to a outside perspective, we are lacking in terms of reliability. I also found this little interesting article from the Citizens Utility Board over in Illinois. I know a lot of people, hey, national stuff, they might have different data against Vermont, whatever. This is from a third-party source, obviously, ranking Vermont 45th in terms of electrical utility reliability performance. Some stats I pulled from this article here. The average time to restore power per customer, 42 minutes. Average outages per customer, about 44, which is over 30 hours of power on average without, I don't know if that's up here or not, but hopefully it goes away there. Perfect. I don't know, screwing or what Richard's doing over there. But again, over 30 hours per year without power. Again, it really puts in perspective the selling point of how important, at least having a towable generator are for your town utility. But again, we'll get into the pros and cons about even having one of those. And again, that's one of the things that we sell to our residential customers. When you consider how, whether it be the amount of food you're losing from the, from a power outage, to the amount of time that you can't do work if you work from home like myself, to the amount of time that, again, you're just losing not being able to, go to the man cave and sit with, watching the game with your boys instead of upstairs playing board games with the kids. Whatever it be, that's a selling point for us when we say, hey, it's easy on the residential side, in Vermont at least, to see why standby power is important, of course. There's a great little video from John Oliver here who talks a little bit about the power grid and its weaknesses, of course.
But disruptions have always been an issue for the power grid. What makes it especially vulnerable now is a combination of two key factors. The first is old age. Most power lines were constructed in the 50s and 60s with a 50-year life expectancy, which they're clearly now well past. And the second is climate change, meaning there's now more danger posed by extreme weather like hurricanes, tornadoes, and abnormally hot or cold temperatures. And that combo of old equipment and new climate threats has been disastrous. The massive campfire in California a few years ago happened because there was a drought in the area, making it essentially a tinderbox, and in intense winds, some Pacific gas and electric equipment failed, and for a pretty infuriating reason.
This is the hook that killed 84 people.
That groove took about 98 years to wear in. It's not a defect. These hooks are what are holding the electrical lines off the ground. And PG&E's decision was simply just to let these things hang until they broke.
When this old hook did break, the power line made contact with the metal tower, showering the ground in sparks. That's how PG&E started the campfire.
Yeah, and let that be a lesson to you. You can't just keep something that old in place and expect it to keep working forever. PG&E basically took the same approach to their equipment as Democrats did with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and in both cases, it didn't end well.
So again, just a great, I'm glad I got that video to work, because I think it's a really great testament to, again, it's not going to be your guys' fault. It's not going to be anyone's fault, really. It'll be company's fault. But really, about who is responsible for these fires or responsible for these natural disasters. But it's obviously your guys' responsibility to be ready for them and be able to act accordingly. So again, just great reason why you guys are here. Great testament to, again, preparedness. And without further ado, thank you for dealing with that technical glitch. I think it'll be good now. But Ted, presenting some state guidance about why these systems and are in place, if you will. Excuse me. Ted?
Thank you, Sam. Ted Fella. I work for State of Vermont Drinking Water Groundwater Protection. I am fairly new to my position. I was a water operator for 22 plus years. I did 8 years water and wastewater at Stratton Mountain, and then I was almost 15 years in North Bennington Water Department, where I was superintendent for 12. also transitioned to this position in April, and my supervisor Matt was supposed to be here today, but he had something else that was more pressing, so I'm taking his place. Go ahead, Sam. So here's the water supply rule. This is directly out of the water supply rule. Making sure that you have continuous service when primary power has been interrupted. You need either two independent sources or auxiliary source. So independent source would be, I think there might be one or two systems in the state where they have, say, Green Mountain Power access. Maybe that's their primary, and then they have one of the co-ops that they can also use. Most people don't have that, so standby power would be either an on-site generator that's on-site, that's there, ready to go whenever your power goes out, or you have a transfer switch and the availability to a portable generator. And the other thing too is natural gas or propane is preferred fuel. If you have a gas generator, just be aware that if you have a well within that area, within that 200-foot protection around a well, you cannot have gas or diesel. The other thing too, as we all know as water operators, is you need to maintain 20 PSI at ground level at all points within the system. So if you have pump stations, if you have hydropneumatic tanks that keep pressure in your system, having a generator or losing power, then having access to a generator will help you keep that 20 pounds so you do not have to go into a boil water notice or do not drink or whatever may happen. And as I said, chemical fuel storage, except natural gas and propane, not allowed within the 200-foot radius of that wellhead or source. So there are some exceptions to having a generator or standby power. If you have a large tank where you have multiple days or you have, say, double the amount of your average daily demand, you do not need a generator because you have plenty of storage to make up for that time when you're down. If you do not, means you have less than an average daily demand in storage. So say you have a well pump that does 10 gallons a minute, you have 77,200 gallons per day is your ADD. If you have a 5,000 gallon tank, that means you have less storage than your ADD. Booster pump stations, as I said, if you've got a booster pump station, you're maintaining it with a booster pump and hydropneumatic tanks, your pressure can't drop below 20 PSI under any conditions. So most places, if you have a power outage, it does not take you long to lose that pressure because people will probably still be using our water. It's going to drop that pressure fairly quickly. So having access to a generator or generator on hand or some type of standby power is essential. Your acceptable forms of standby power, you have permanent on-site generator installation, as Sam's probably going to talk about. They're great, they're on demand, they're always there. You don't have to look for one, you don't have to go hook it up, it's already ready to go. That being said, they are also very expensive. Smaller systems especially, or people that have, like, say, pumping stations, they probably have a transfer switch with a quick connect. Now, according to water supply rule, it says you must include access to a suitable power generator, which that means it's either system owned or accessible. If you're a contract operator and you have one generator, say it's a small system, you have a generator on a trailer or one that you can transport, you have for one system you can transport to different systems, that is acceptable. Contract with a vendor, I don't know, Sam, you could maybe speak to some of that, whether there's contracts out there. That was kind of one of those.
I could jump in quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Just very quickly. I mean, we have rentals for one. We have a rental down in Bellows Falls at one of their booster stations right now, or pump station, whatever. Excuse me, Jim. I know you can talk more to that on that contract there, but regardless, we're seeing more. I know that, for example, also in what is it? Oh goodness me, Pulteney. We had a generator there at the rental. But forgive me, to your point there, Ted, we do have, we're not seeing it as, the state hasn't cracked down on these contracts yet as much as they are intending to, or signaling. To that point, we are seeing more people sign up for, in the spring when they do have the pumps, or, the access to, portables, if you will.
Mhm.
We do have those available. So, but to that point, no, we're not really seeing too much of an influx right now of people scrambling for rental contracts in prescience of that, if you will. So, but more people are getting the transfer switch. I know Heinsberg, they have a potential contract that they're looking over right now with us. So more people are investing in the transfer switch and the quick connection first, because it seems that there's a lot of older systems that are out there that want that upgrade as opposed to going forth and buying a portable or putting the cart before the horse for that, excuse me.
Then alternate means, which there's not many of them, battery banks, power walls. A, they're really expensive, and B, the technology probably isn't quite there to do large systems. The other thing too you have to be careful with is also in that 200-foot radius around a wellhead or source, lithium-ion batteries cannot be stored or used within that area. So that's one more thing that if you were using, I mean, I know like there's some small generators that you can use lithium-ion batteries, like Ryobi makes some. I'm sure there's other companies that make them, but those are lithium-ion. If you've got a wellhead nearby, you should not be using those.
Yeah, I know right now we are distributor of Briggs & Stratton, and their new energy solutions line has come out with, they call it the simplified battery wall system. It's a competitor to Powerwall, the Tesla Powerwall, but the problems with the Tesla Powerwall are, as Ted was saying here, are that lithium-ion battery that is a danger obviously, more so than the, I know it's a lithium sodium phosphate, or what is it, Jim? The cobalt, excuse me. And I know obviously the Powerwall 3, which is not supposed to be released until next year, I believe that's also a nickel, NMC, nickel, magnesium, cadmium, cobalt, excuse me. But regardless, that technology still isn't out yet until at least another year, probably a couple of years, being honest, with the way that things are developed. And to that point, the simplified system we would have would just be so expensive for the size that a lot of these facilities would need. It's still a couple of years, at least for your sizes, that for this purposes, is a little bit out, of course. But of course, Jim, anything further on that right there? That's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see some battery systems being used for controls, but not for the pumps themselves, because the systems would be $100,000 plus to try to run a pump. And, they have, unlike a generator, if we're in a long, tight power outage, the way we were in Christmas of 2022, that wet snowstorm, that really devastated Washington Electric Co-op. Their areas was totally nailed, and those folks were without power for over a week. That battery system would be depleted easily. The one thing about total generators, and we have a lot of clients that we have sold them to primarily in drinking water systems versus wastewater systems. When there is a major issue like Irene, for instance, where it's statewide, and maybe even in the entire Northeast, we have 15 towables. We have the most in the state by far, and it's when something happens, they're gone. You've got the telecommunications people; they'll bring them, and right away they'll call us and say, "Give me 4 of them," and start charging you. And if they have to leave your yard, they're safe for us. And you have those type of scenarios. So it's best that you buy one if you're intending to use it to go down to various stations. The one thing about the smaller booster stations, most of them, many of them, we're doing one in Williamstown. We've done Barry, a number of them. Is they don't require, typically the pumps are smaller, and you can use an air-cooled generator, and usually it's very simple to set up. You're talking about $8,000 to get that pump station, and when you start doing the math about running on a towable around various stations, particularly if there's bad weather or roads are flooded, etc., that can be an impediment to even get the towable to the location. So in those small booster pump stations, the air cools go up to 26 kW, which is going to give you roughly 110 amps, which most of those systems are 100 amp, systems of the small booster pumps, single phase. So they may be a good alternative to, and over the long term, a much more better solution for those. The larger pump stations, or they're obviously gonna require a larger generator. Typically, you know, it could go up to 100 kW, 150 kW, which is the largest that you can do in propane on a cost-effective basis. Because once you get above 150 kW, you need a generator for propane. We did one for a nursing home in downtown Montpelier, 300 kW. Basically, what you're doing is you're converting a diesel engine to work on propane. And so the cost of those generators are probably 3 times their diesel counterpart. And they require a lot of gas. A generator like that requires 4 1,000-gallon tanks to run. So that could be a bit of a challenge sometimes to just store that much gas. But most freshwater pumping stations, 100, 150K, will handle the loads that are there. The diesels, obviously, you have to be, to Ted's point, you know, you have to be outside that zone to use those type of generators. I know a lot of people prefer diesel, particularly since they get diesel from the town garage. It seems like an easy, you know, refilling solution. But, you know, you have that issue of potential contamination. The diesels that they sell now that are sitting on fuel tanks, they do have a double wall tank, and they have a leak detector. So them during a leak is highly unusual, but it can happen. I don't want to say never, but it can obviously happen. Things do happen. But where the real danger is with diesel fuel is when they get filled. It's not, you know, we'll hear a couple stories several times a year. They're filling the tank, and they don't realize that all of a sudden they're overfilling the tank and the fuel's hitting the ground. We hear about those. That's more the common situation that we find with diesel, where potential contamination is that we're actually being filled with fuel. So if your needs are for 500, 600 amps, propane is definitely the way to go.
And I'll divert to you when we talk further about, again, some more pluses and minuses of each type of generator, excuse me. But again, I think it's a great summation to obviously acceptable forms and what it means to you guys for us.
Okay, so when you're installing standby power, it does not require construction permit through State of Vermont Drinking Water Groundwater Protection. You need to have it properly sized and spec'd. So that's generally make sure that necessary facilities powers it adequately. If you have you don't want to get a generator where you can only run part of your, if you've got large pumps or large motors that are required for your plant to function, if that generator doesn't run it, it's not really any good to you because you can only operate for a certain amount of time before you're going to need those. Typically, for small side, maybe an electrician is going to size it for you, or someone that installs generators, or electrical engineers for larger ones, or someone who's similarly qualified. Someone like Sam would be doing something like that, or Jim.
Not me. I will promise you guys, I will not be on site. I wish I had my engineering degrees and certifications, excuse me.
Then the other thing to ensure too is that it's compatible with the equipment you're powering. If you have 3-phase power, you can't get a single-phase generator. That is not going to work. Similarly, could you do a 3-phase generator with single-phase?
It's a Josh question. It's a wonderful Josh question.
Is that? Does that?
All with a phase converter.
Okay, you could do it with that, but okay. I wasn't sure how that worked out. Yeah, you want to make sure that whatever you're putting in is going to work for you. You don't want to find that out in the middle of emergency where you need to get this working and all of a sudden it's not working because it's not the right generator. Then also you're going to, anything you get service-wise, as-built, maintenance manuals, anything to go with that generator, because it's part of your water system, you're going to need, as the next slide says, you're going to include it with your O&M manual. If you do install this, it's going to be an addendum to your O&M. O&Ms are required for every water system, and when you do an update such as this, you need to add that into it as an addendum, so that way, you know, if anyone picks up that O&M manual and they need to operate your system, they don't know it, they can go in there and say, okay, there's a generator, this is how it operates, it's automatic, it comes on during power outage, or If you need to hook it up, it walks you right through all that. That, like I said, it's going to have your generator specs, what size generators, what phase it is, what it operates, the maintenance schedule, how often is it serviced, the test schedule. If it's one that's already on site, that's probably got a schedule where it comes on once a week, operates for a certain amount of time, probably operates under load every so often. But if it's a portable one or something like that, towable, whether it's towable or you've got a small one that you can put in the back of the truck, you need to test those and make sure it works. Like I said, you don't want to find out in the middle of an emergency that your generator is not going to do it for you.
Ted, it sounded like you need a maintenance schedule even if you have a towable, correct?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
That should all be part of that. I don't know that we're going to dive into that on our end and say, well, you don't have a maintenance schedule in here. But for an operator, and me coming from an operator background, you're going to want to make sure that it's going to work when you need it. So then you got your manufacturer's documentation. That's going to be in the O&M. Your service vendors, whether it's Brookfield or someone else that does that service for you, you're going to want all that information in there so that way when you need it, you can readily pick that up and find out what you need to do. Then finally, funding mechanisms. You've got Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Some communities still have ARPA funding available. That would be useful for this. USDA Rural Development. Self-funded if it's doable. Plenty of communities can self-fund their things. And then there's various other initiatives. I don't know a lot about funding. We have Healthy Homes, Energy Resilience, federal grants. For funding options, you're going to want to contact the Water Investment Division of Drinking Water Groundwater Protection, and they can give you more information on that. They can point you in the right direction.
We have also helped many municipalities on these funding in terms of going in, sizing, giving them pricing to understand how long of a grant they might be applying for. I've seen some people just wing it and have got money, but it's smaller than what the actual project will actually require. So there's no charge for us to come in and take a look. It's one of the things we want to look, particularly with the pumps, with the lock rotors, to get enough power to start those pumps if they don't have VFDs on them. That sometimes becomes a tricky point in that the power system, you may look at the label of the motor and it says, oh, running load amps, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, but you're not looking at the lock rotor amps in terms of how much power, inrush power is required to get that pump started. So that sometimes becomes a tricky point. The other piece that gets a little tricky is switchgear. Your controls over the years have become much more sophisticated, and so they don't like blips of power or getting slammed coming from the generator, turning off right away, and the utility power comes and slams it. They don't like it. So a lot of times, particularly in wastewater facilities, we're using transfer switches with delayed transfer mechanisms. So you can set it for a number of seconds or a number of minutes, so that your controls can de-energize before utility power comes back in peace. So as it goes from one blip to the other, the controls in some cases freeze up and you can't even use them. So just something else when you're looking at doing these grants, take a look at what type of, not only the generator, but what type of transfer switch is needed so that the system runs smoothly.
Jim, does your company offer services to come and do a facility analysis for load studies on the gear,
Yep.
everything like that?
Yeah, we have equipment where we will actually put it in for typically a week, 2 weeks, and we'll do a power study, and we'll see all your power peaks and
Yep.
amps, and if there's any spikes, unusual spikes, so that we can know that what type of generator will be looked at through that analysis. And again, we don't charge for that. We'll set it for a couple of weeks for you, and then we're able to give you kind of an estimate so that you, when you're applying for your grant, you don't underfund yourself. Yeah, they have got very good data. The one thing you gotta remember though, with the data that you're getting from them, that is a 15-minute, when they're measuring in 15-minute increments. So when a pump comes on, it's a lot faster than 15 minutes. So you're still not getting the reads of the, the inrush current for pumps that don't have VFDs. If you have VFDs on all your pumps, then yeah, it's really good data to use. But if you don't, then you might want to have us take a look at it so that we can see the actual spikes. Generators can have a certain capacity to handle inrushes, but there's voltage dip when that happens. And so if you got, the standard in the industry is a 35% voltage dip, which to me is a little bit inadequate because controls seeing a 35, particularly more sophisticated controls, seeing a 35% voltage dip, they don't like it and they'll lock up. So if GMP data is great, we use it a lot with just regular, light commercial and residential, we'll use their data, and it's great for that. But for plants, large plants, I think it's still better to have a formal power read of your system.
Yeah, we're 50% instead of 35% for the whole car on the other side of it. So instead of pulling from 35%, you want 50% more, so that when that inrush comes in, you've got a 15% buffer.
Right.
So you don't have that overdraw,
Right.
start smoking switch gear and stuff like that, yeah.
I have a question that may kind of be from the state's perspective a little bit.
Sure.
Thinking of very small rural water systems that are trying to figure out how to adopt the standby power or backup power plan. Can you speak to the efficacy or the ability of a system to use a 3-point hitch mounted generator? Because a lot of these smaller systems are going to have access to a tractor. They're already maintaining, they have on site, they can get to rural areas. If they're reliant on an outside company that has to make it through flooded roads, come through washouts, that's going to be potentially days or weeks. Whereas if they've got a PTO mounted generator that they can drive on site, they don't have fuel storage on site, it's part of a piece of equipment that's mobile. Is that something that you've seen, or is that something that the
I
state
haven't
got issue
seen
with?
it, but it definitely would work.
And it would
with
also
the-
save some money compared to.
Yeah, if you have that, the
dedicated-
caveat is there's a lot of small systems where you have your treatment plant, you have your pump, and then your well is like right there. That's where you run into issue is if you have your well nearby or your source nearby, and you have most tractors are diesel or gas. So that's where you have to really be careful. Is
Right.
how close is your source? If your source isn't right there, then that's perfectly fine.
Right,
there-
just from the source protection standpoint,
Yeah.
you're still able to go in and brush hog around that wellhead, you're still able to go in and do maintenance, so you're still, to the best of my knowledge, there's no real teeth that would say you can't bring a piece of equipment in there for a temporary use, because that still would fall within acceptable use for a source protection area.
It would, but still with a small portable generator, that's the same thing that, if someone needs that, I guess you could use it, you just need to be very careful. You can't store it there. I'm trying to think, that comes into, you're right, it's a little bit of a foggy area, whereas like, it's not gonna be here permanently, it's not stored here, but how close, how close is that, or how difficult is that to deal with? Is that really a source of contamination? That one, I'll probably talk with Matt a little bit on that, just to kind of get a better idea. That's something, didn't think about, like if you've got a tractor with a 3-point hitch or a generator
Right,
on
if
a
you've got the
PTO.
equipment already, then.
Yeah,
if you
what's
are a
the
small
what's the
system that
circumstances,
funds
whether
that
your
could
well is right
potentially-
there or not? Okay, yeah. So I don't have a clear-cut answer on that for you, but no, it's a good point to bring up, and I'll talk it over with him.
Sure, thanks.
No problem.
Any other questions for Ted on the state guidance, guys? Yes, Ted.
Ted, I don't know if you know the answer to this.
Sure.
But isn't the state's position that water pumping station is legally required to have a generator that doesn't meet 20 PSI?
You need to have at least a hookup to it. Yes, you need to be able to maintain that, and that's where there's plenty that have the quick connect, so you can bring in a portable generator to do it that way.
required if you have storage. If you have backup storage, then you're all set. You wouldn't need to necessarily have a generator at that pump station. You have a volume storage tank.
If you have volume storage, if you're gravity, if you have a pump station where you need to try to maintain that pressure too.
Your tank's above your offset.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, if you have more than your average daily demand.
Yep.
So if your average daily demand is 10,000 gallons and you've got a 15,000 gallon tank, then you're all set. Yeah, you don't need, it's not required.
One thing that I found interesting with systems that have water storage and there's a power outage, people have a tendency to not use as much water as well because they think they're gonna run out of the water because their power is out.
People tend to conserve whether it's necessary or not.
I mean, we had, at Truish, we had a storage tank.
Yep.
People were filling their bathtubs. I said, you don't need to do that.
Well, our system is just the opposite. Because everybody from the outlying area that's off the village system comes in and fills up.
Fills up all their stuff.
On their buddy faucets, and we see a lot of higher usage.
Okay.
Well,
Any other questions?
Ted, yeah, thank you for your
Thank you.
time, Ted. Really
Thanks for
appreciate it.
having me.
Thank you. And Ted's gonna stick around for a little bit, so obviously, and actually seems like for lunch too, so don't blame him for getting a good sandwich. But, so he's here for questions if you guys come up with them or have anything that you wanna run by him, and obviously Jim and go in here too. Now, next guys, I'm gonna go through the law of the land for the national side of things, and I'm gonna go through it very, well, not quickly, but we'll get through it because it's not as fun, obviously, but we'll have a quick break after that. But obviously, we want to talk a little bit about the NFPA, National Fire Prevention Association, the Independent Standards Organization in the United States. The mission is to reduce fire risks, of course. Their standards are developed with the American National Standards Institute process, and their standards are typically adopted into state statutes, such is the case in Vermont. We obviously require clients for authority having jurisdiction approval, which in this case is obviously the state of Vermont. The National Fire Prevention Association's most important code is NFPA 110, the standard for emergency and standby power systems. We're going to talk a little bit about the maintenance, obviously, mostly about the maintenance, but a little bit about some of the installation standards and some things to think about when you do go through the process of investing in the systems. But obviously NFPA 110 pertains emergency power sources, transfer equipment, controls, supervisory equipment, and all other equipment needed to supply electrical power to the load terminals of transfer equipment. We're going to start off with Chapter 4, where that's system classification. The most important part of Chapter 4 for you guys is the Level 1 versus Level 2 systems. Level 1 systems shall be installed where failure to equipment should result in the direct loss of human life or serious injuries. Great examples, obviously, nursing homes, hospitals. Goodness me, those are the two that obviously stand out in my mind right now. The American Red Cross, obviously, is an example of there are certain data centers in regards to the hospitals that fall into that. But really, direct loss of human life. You guys fall under Level 2 systems, which shall be installed where failure to the emergency emergency supply system is to perform less critical to human life and safety, and obviously, as we saw with the recent disasters and this past disaster, I think that you guys do somehow fall a little bit under Level 1. But in any regard, you guys are still responsible for human life and safety at the level of again, do what Ted's saying, if an emergency is striking, people were to panic. So again, Chapter 4, the basis I think was important for you guys, at least Chapter 4. Chapter 7 is regards to location installation guidelines. We don't go too much into that. I know that Alice and I talked a little bit about that because that's part of the turnkey care that you're going to receive from, at least from us, but other generator systems companies should. They will take care of all these with a site review. But for things to keep in mind that I've seen a lot, and I know Josh has, the emergency power supply room shall be separated from the rest of the building by construction with a 2-hour fire resistant rating. I know Jim has run into situations with the state fire inspector where they demand certain firewall protection where, Jim, you can explain more if you want to, but where sometimes you won't think they need it, but they do crack down on these codes, of course. No other equipment including architectural appurtenances except those that serve the space shall be permitted in the EPS room. It's both indoor and outdoor. We've seen all too many times, Josh, I've been on too many calls with you where you have boxes and ladders and crack blocking the ATS or the box or the system itself. And obviously that's not only just a risk for for fire risk, but that's obviously a risk for our techs and for people that are going to service it, because what if something falls on them or they have to take the time to move stuff before they can service an emergency? That's obviously critical. Level 1, emergency power supply system equipment should not be installed in the same room with normal service equipment where it is rated at over 150 volts to the ground or greater than equal or greater than 100,000 amps. Excuse me. You guys don't qualify, I believe, for level 1, so I'm going to skip over that one. But I know Jim will talk more about that towards the end during his part. And obviously the rooms in housing level 1 or level 2 EPSS equipment shall be designed and located to minimize damage from flooding, resulting in firefighting, sewer water backup, or other disasters or occurrences. Jim, I think it's 10 million gallons a year, unfortunately, of raw sewage are dumped into Lake Champlain. And a lot of it is because of, whether it be Burlington or any other towns along the lake, attributing it to the natural disasters of power outages and having to back the effluent into the lake. This is a serious issue when now we're having loss of life for animals along the Dallas Bay area with the cyanobacteria buildup, and even areas along Plattsburgh, New York, that are no longer able to be ventured because of the cyanobacteria, which obviously is direct because of the effluent in the lake. Fuel guidelines. Fuel systems design shall provide a supply of clean fuel to prime mover, and tanks shall be sized so that the fuel is consumed within the storage life. Provisions shall be made to remediate fuel that is stale or contaminated, or to replace stale or contaminated fuel with clean fuel. Again, I left a lot of detailed stuff in here because I know some of you guys are wastewater operators or folks that aren't part of water operation. I think from the state over there, sir. But regardless, it's important when you think about diesel degradation. And if you're not, there's a question at the end for another T-shirt. But there's a certain lifespan. If you're not in, you are going to risk the hazard of clogging your system and obviously system failure. Jesus, nothing's not helping me. Maintenance testing. Chapter 8 is the soup and nuts of, I think, NFPA 110. Again, you can have an entire course on NFPA 110 and some of the other national electric codes. But again, this is the grand, when it comes to generator maintenance, this is the all-encompassing power. Chapter 1, or Section 1, says routine maintenance and operational testing program shall in these terms of legalese means will, be based on the following: manufacturer recommendations, instruction manuals, minimum requirements of this chapter, and the authority having jurisdiction. So obviously, what you will see based on NFPA 110 is the minimum of what you guys should also expect to. And I do know, and I hear so many times, a lot of guys have their own folks maintain things, which is okay. But when we do get into this, you will realize that having your own maintenance crew handle these things is just not enough. So the first thing I think is very important to emphasize, Josh has seen it all too many times, and I know Jim really wanted me to emphasize this today, is spare parts on hand. Special tools and testing devices necessary for routine maintenance will be available for use when needed. Replacement for parts identified by experience as high mortality items will be maintained in a secure location. Consideration will be given to stocking spare parts as recommended by the manufacturer. And obviously, a little tip there, just maintain a list of what's needed and likely to fail spell parts. I know Josh will probably explain it when I get into more of the generator maintenance itself. But Josh, just off the top of the head, can you name 2 high mortality items?
Block heaters and direct belts, fan belts, stuff like that.
Perfect. And I'm sure you'll get into more of that, of course, but 2 things that just get overthought of, or again, sometimes the funding might not be there for what's needed, but if you have anything extra to put towards your spare parts, it might come to help you in a disaster. Now, routine maintenance and operation testing is again why we're all gathered here today. Section 3, subsection 1 says that the EPSS shall be maintained to ensure a reasonable degree that the system is capable of supplying service within the time specified for the type and for the duration of the specified class. That translates back to section chapter 4, but again, it's making sure that when we go in and do our rating of your system, you have a system that is, again, to Ted's point, capable of supplying the power that it is rated to supply. A written schedule for routine maintenance will be established. So whether that's, again, you guys having someone that, hey, every 6 months, yep, it's in the schedule, having at least it on paper so when the inspector comes, you have the proof of that, of course. And transfer switches shall be inspected to a maintenance and testing program that includes the following: checking of connections, inspection or testing for evidence of overheating and excessive contact erosion, removal of dust and dirt, as well as replacement of the contacts when required. And when I said earlier that there's a lot of times where guys tell me, oh, we do all ourselves, we test things ourselves. I know you are not really, I don't know if you do it or not, good, God bless if you do, but you guys really aren't supposed to be doing any work on the transfer switch yourselves. You know, that's when one of our certified techs come in, or you have to hire an electrician, whatever you prefer. But as we'll talk about, you know, we do both. We service the transfer switch as well as the generator, so you don't have to deal with any of the extra scheduling. Battery maintenance is, again, we'll talk about at the end, one of the most important things that gets completely overlooked in the generator systems, that fails when you have an issue, just like this frickin' computer, excuse me. Storage batteries, including electrolyte levels of battery voltage using connection systems, will be inspected weekly and maintained in full compliance with manufacturer's specifications. I'm sure you guys have the voltage reader on the controls, but obviously I will talk about in a minute investing in a multimeter just to make sure that you have the ability to have the analog test instead of relying on a faulty control. Again, when this is all for when disaster is happening, or inevitably will happen. Maintenance of the lead-acid battery shall include monthly testing and a recording of electrolyte-specific gravity. Battery connectance testings will be permitted in lieu of the testing specific gravity when applicable or warranted. This is I think one of the more important ones here. Defective batteries will be replaced immediately upon discovery defects. So obviously, if you test it and it's not testing right, you know, I do another test, or this, Jim, excuse me.
Yeah, the other thing is, manufacturer's best practice is that batteries should be replaced every 3 years. And I know we get a lot of resistance from clients on this. They say, well, you know, you test the battery, it's fine. But the manufacturers are, let's say, recommending, which is what NFPA 110 saying, whatever the manufacturer recommends. And you know, batteries is every 3 years. So if somebody's, if you think someone's trying to sell you a battery unnecessarily, that's really not the case. It's just because these systems are considered, you know, legally required. They're critical, and I can't tell you how many times, particularly in the winter, and you get the call at 2 in the morning, the unit won't start, and we're sending somebody out with a battery, and it's costing them $700-800 for a weekend call or a midnight call to replace a battery, when you could have replaced it at the regular maintenance for $100, you know? So just beware, we're not trying to sell you a lot of batteries, we're just trying to do what's recommended by the manufacturer.
Absolutely. And to that point, Jim, I highly recommend. I've heard stories again. North Country Community College. I took a trip out to that way to see what they needed for their servicing, and he was telling me a story about how their cat rep, they sold them a battery or tried selling a battery, excuse me, for $2,300, which obviously included the travel and the labor time. But when you consider, obviously, you know, for some of these bigger companies, most of the expenses, the travel time, and the cost to get someone out there, obviously. So anything that you guys can do, and to Jim's point, testing your own batteries, replacing batteries if you need to, that's hey, recommended. But as I mentioned, there are certain things that you guys, hey, legally not able to do or probably want to do, which leave it in the hands of professionals, of course. Fuel testing. A fuel quality test shall be performed at least annually using appropriate ASTM standards or the manufacturer's recommendations. When we talk about diesel fuel maintenance and testing shall begin the day of installation, and the first fill is stored in order to establish a benchmark. And diesel fuel shall be tested for degradation no less than twice annually, with a minimum of 6 months between testing. All testing shall be performed using ASTM approved test methods and meet engines manufacturers' specifications and requirements. I know that we do our fuel test included with our services, obviously, you know, for diesel. But Jim, I know that fuel polish that we don't have a fuel polishing, correct?
We work with
The New England fuel.
Subcontract to do fuel polishing.
Yeah.
You know, the fuel, now that they moved to low sulfur over these last years, the removal of the sulfur, which is actually an antibiotic, so it kills, you know, growth of microbes. The fuel no longer having the sulfur, and you get condensation in the tank, you get water nursing homes now, they're requiring 72-hour tanks, you know, and that's a lot of fuel, to be sitting there, and they'll never use that in a year, so they're gonna be subject to, someone coming in and, doing a fuel polishing situation.
Does that happen with both gas and diesel?
No, it's just really, related to, diesel fuel. The propane, there's no issue.
No, I mean, gasoline.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you have a gasoline situation, yeah, that's why if you have a gasoline portables that you use for something small pump, the best thing to do is when you're done, you know, drain the gas, and burn out whatever's left in there, otherwise you're gonna find out the carburetors do. You should try to use the fuel that, is, leaded, because, excuse me, without ethanol, because that ethanol, alcohol, you know, that's the thing that, will damage small engines.
It's gotta be 91 octane or higher.
Yep,
Yep.
that's what they sell it.
If you guys have a good connection at one of those airborne speedways or anything like that, good place to go for the high octane stuff.
Or the county airports.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Another note, the diesel comes out of Montreal, does have an additive in it, antibacterial.
Yeah.
The stuff coming out of Albany does not. And the only reason I know this is I work with a fuel company quite a bit.
We'll get into that at the end here. We have, luckily, again, the ultra low sulfur diesel fuel,
Yeah.
which in the new American standards, it's again causing more issues in the long run than helping out right now at least.
On the gasoline side too, one thing that I've noticed and heard from some fuel stations is if you're filling a small can with non-ethanol gasoline for your portable generator, if you can hit that non-ethanol button and put the first gallon into your truck, because that hose still contains whatever the previous person pumped. So you may have a half gallon of ethanol fuel in that hose, and then you then fill your 1.5 gallon container with
I didn't even think about that.
ethanol, and now you've got ethanol fuel in there. So I do it, I run a non-ethanol in all my small equipment, but just put a gallon or two in your truck first, or whatever else you have, or find a pump that someone just pumped on ethanol, just a little. It might save you, but it might not, but it's worth it to me at least.
Good point.
Yeah, great. I didn't even know. I'm glad I'm learning something today. Yeah.
Why were you?
And it's nice too because I know, again, from the other side of like New York, the only place that would sell it is Stewart's, the high octane stuff, or ethanol free to Jim's point. So nowadays we're seeing it more prevalently, which is nice because again, people are realizing how deadly it is to the small engines that again the end consumers are using. EPSS, including all components, shall be inspected weekly and exercised under load at least monthly. So that means at least getting someone out to all your sites, just giving a visual check over. Generator sets and service shall be exercised at least monthly for a minimum of 30 minutes and under one of the following methods. Loading that maintains the minimum exhaust gas temperatures as recommended by the manufacturer or under the operating temperature conditions and not less than 30% of the kilowatt rating. Diesel EPSSs shall be tested monthly with the available EPSS load and exercised annually with loads of not less than 50% of kilowatt rating for 30 minutes and not less than 75% for 1 hour with a continuous run time or test time, an hour and a half. And again, we'll get into more of the importance of, again, why the testing is so important, especially with the load ratings for the diesel EPSSs. Your EPSSs should include, including all components, excuse me. The EPSS shall be initiated by simulating power outages and using the test switches on the ATS or by opening a normal breaker. So again, just making sure that the ATS is transferring over. Transfer surveillance, which you just alluded to, shall be operated monthly. The monthly test of a switch shall consist of electronically operating the transfer switch from the primary position to the alternate position and then a return to that primary position. Record keeping, I think, is probably going to be the important thing that I touch on with you guys, at least at the operator level. A written schedule for routine maintenance and operators testing will be established. Records will be created and maintained for the inspections, operational tests, exercising repairs, and modifications. And again, I know for some of you guys with a lot of systems, it can be a lot of work there. And records required in 8.51 shall be made available to the AHJ on request. So whenever a inspector is coming through to ask you for these documents. And obviously a permit record shall include the following: date of the maintenance report, the identification of the servicing personnel, so that's Josh or one of our techs, a notation of the unsatisfactory condition and any corrective action taken or parts placed, and of course testing any repair for the time as recommended by the manufacturer. And I know obviously when we do our services, Josh or any of the other service techs, they give their write-up for you guys to put in your records, of course, just like of course any other place would be offered. Again, very quick thing on NFPA 110. Again, just for the operational maintenance guidelines and what we expect or what is expected for you guys. I want to give this time bathroom break, stretch your legs, take a couple seconds. 5-10 minutes would be awesome. And once everyone returns, we'll continue on. But yeah, feel free to stretch your legs and we'll start in a few minutes. Thank you guys. Yes, Ted.
One thing I wanted to clarify
Yes.
before Brad's question was, if you're using diesel or gas generators, they cannot be stored within the protected area. They can be operated temporarily.
Okay.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That's why I wanted clarification. I got that. So yeah, if you use, it's just.
Don't use your pump house as a storage facility.
Yeah, I know people do that.
Yeah, oh yeah, I don't say it totally joking.
Yeah, you go on a sanitary search and there's a lawnmower sitting in the pump house. It's like, guys,
Gotcha, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And one of the other end.
Oh. It's actually,
Big box.
Yeah. She ate dinner, and I woke up like 8:30, ate dinner, and then I couldn't fall asleep. It's all about. No, it's probably not. Yeah, exactly. A little too much confidence. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was just another, and then having that valve leak was a shock. Then stupidly, it's on, around the playing field, stays, and there's a couple people that post, like, we have water again, and then 20 minutes later, oh, it's off again. Trying, and people are even good for months. I've seen tricks that are silly, I guess. There's been no one who can't believe it. That's actually really hard to do. At the end of the day, we were watching the stranger was broke. And there was a guy in his car, and it was just his foundation. And the poor guy gets out, wearing socks, standing in the sun. He had the best attitude in the world, which almost made me feel worse. I just thought, well, especially after this is the first time, so I was all that. This is really like hit me. You know, you just go, and then, you know, it's all there was two.
not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna.
You're still hanging on there.
I just saw the last one. They put up a 7-star. I asked him, I said, so was it, we couldn't go to fire truck? He goes, well, no, fire truck go across the street, log truck across the street. I said, so why did you go and do that? We could have hired somebody for the winter, plow and sand that road for 10 grand. Spend that money on I said, you gotta think, I said, I understand if a fire truck or ambulance can't get across the bridge on 170. But if they can make it across the bridge, the only problem is our plow truck with a load on can't make it across. That's not a problem. You know what I mean? And I know the people that live up there, they probably wouldn't bother anything with a tractor. You know? There's only, how many houses past the bridge? Yeah, well, just up past the last house. Yeah, I said, yeah. That's all. Yeah. Exactly, you know. Yeah, you're right. Everything's been collected for 30 years. And it's like, now we're paying the repercussions. We're saying, well, electric expenses, well, if you maintain it, the law, exactly. Not bad, Sean. It's hard to see. But now we're maintaining it's like, anytime we can have something, this is the best of I'm about ready to get it. Fire district and that, paint road does not have anything that. I'm about ready to go fire district. I drive with all truck for, oh really? Oh, absolutely. He showed me that. Yep. Yep. No, it's just, yeah. I've never seen oil that color. It was like right on. More oil. And Yeah, I want to flush it out. Because down on the oil pipeline, they folks get caught on the bottom, they pull it off, so they take the oil. Should be that way. No, I'm happy with that. Yeah, so. Small world, like down back there. Water. We got a cup of coffee before we sit down. I got one traveling to do that when I get back. Yeah. Oh, nice.
I'm usually trying to be pretty well-leaded, but that's street food. another great girl, when I went out there, cow on it. He tried to turn on the lights last night, got everything flushed, got it all set to go, and was driving out, break the brake, all that out.
Yeah, we'll start. As I said, no worries. It's good to see you. Looks like almost everyone's back.
Or if you want, well, you have it.
What's that?
I'm sure you can get
Right,
it back.
you got it. Yeah.
They're great, they're great guys. Yeah, your expertise and stuff. Luckily, their water system basically touched down to the distribution side. So it's just, they have experience with it and they're used to doing everything just to do it. But yeah, and then Tristan is acting as public works director, liaison, road, Oh, really? No kidding. That's cool. Yeah. This stuff doesn't, don't have to look very hard to find a connection. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll let him know for sure. It'd be good for you two to introduce yourselves anyways. Tristan's a real good guy. Yeah. You're just a guy.
Someone just left. Why don't you wait till he's back? Then we'll start recording.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny, I have no ties to beach.
I know. So many times. Exactly. I just about to say, that's one thing I was worried about. Is like, oh God, everyone's going to be like so bored or so not interested that. But thank God everyone's actually engaging. So.
And then, when we travel, I do have evaluations.
Absolutely.
What other topics?
Sure thing. That sounds good. We can do that. No problem.
I remember working on the boat, we always had big bales of oil pallets, and they were picking them, but I'd never heard of it before, but I'm sure it's the same company. Well, they weren't crazy. Sure.
What's your name, sir? Jeremy. You're from the state? Which you work with us, correct? Awesome. We hear good things from you guys. You guys say good stuff about us.
We would always lay pigments down, so that one drop of oil came out of that engine. We knew there was a drop of oil coming, instead of the guys that spotted us out. Wait till you get out and pump it out.
Thank you. It's appreciate to hear the good things. I know whether it be from some people dissatisfied with one thing or other, but we have real customers that love us, so we appreciate it. Exactly right. Yeah.
I would almost frame a picture of it. I remember the first tour I took of
Who's Josh, your tech, or who's your tech out there? Eric's great. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah. I know, yeah. Exactly. Well, we'll get into it too many times. People just overlook the cool, or just thinking that thing will just keep running, not understanding how the engine kind of works over time, you know. But yeah, again, we appreciate that hey, we're able to actually give Jim likes to hear, tell Jim that you love Eric. He likes to hear those tidbits because Eric and Josh are the two guys that, again, without them, we really wouldn't have the name and service or anything. They're wonderful when it comes to just, again, teaching you, whether it be teaching you guys, hey, here's this is why I recommend it, instead of just throwing a thing at you and saying, hey, pay this. This is my quote. So, well, hey, it's great to meet you. I'm going to get started up here in a second here. Great. Guys, if you don't mind returning to your seats, I'm going to start up in a few minutes here, if that's all right. No, I know. I'm gonna give him the Royal Rumble here. Folks in the back, if you don't mind, I'm gonna start up in a couple seconds here. Thank you guys over there, Josh and Ross, or John and Ross. Thank you. All right, so now I'm glad to say we're gonna have a little more engagement, hopefully a little more things that again appeal to you besides the national codes and you know, the legalese. So before we get into anything of the generator maintenance, I think it's important to talk to you guys about what is a generator. Whether you guys know what it is or not, I think it's going to be important to just kind of go through some of these basic parts and give you that 101 overview. So by definition, electrical generator is any machine that converts mechanical energy to electricity for transmission and distribution over power lines for domestic, commercial, industrial customers. Generators also produce electrical power required for automobiles, aircraft, ships, and trains. So the way that electricity gets produced is whether it be made through coal, nuclear power, however, turbines spin, generating electrical charge, which then is distributed to the houses or the commercial entities that use it. Obviously, a small generator or a standby generator works the exact same principle, obviously on a much smaller scale. And that's from Britannica. This is a great video just of the overview of the parts of a generator from generatorsource.com. I thought was obviously very topical for today's lesson. If it wants to work again today. Of course. There we go.
How does a generator work? An electric generator is a device that converts mechanical energy obtained from an external source into electrical energy as the output. It is important to understand that a generator does not actually create electrical energy. Instead, it uses the mechanical energy supplied to it to force the movement of electric charges present in the wire of its windings through an external electric circuit. The flow of electric charges can be induced by moving an electrical conductor in a magnetic field. This movement creates a voltage difference between the two ends of the wire or electrical conductor, which in turn causes the electric charges to flow, thus generating electric current. The main components of an electric generator can be broadly classified as follows: engine, alternator, fuel system, cooling and exhaust systems, control panel, and the main assembly or frame. Engine. The engine is the source of the input mechanical energy to the generator. The size of the engine is directly proportional to the maximum power output the generator can supply. Generator engines operate on a variety of fuels such as diesel, gasoline, propane, and natural gas. Smaller engines usually operate on gasoline, while larger engines run on diesel, liquid propane, propane gas or natural gas. Alternator. The alternator, also known as the genhead, is the part of the generator that produces the electrical output from the mechanical input supplied by the engine. It contains an assembly of stationary and moving parts encased in a housing. The components work together to cause relative movement between the magnetic and electric fields, which in turn generates electricity. Fuel system. The fuel system or fuel tank usually has sufficient capacity to keep the generator operational for 6 to 8 hours on an average. In the case of small generator units, the fuel tank is a part of the generator's skid base or is mounted on top of the generator frame. Cooling and exhaust system. Continuous usage of the generator causes its various components to get heated up. It is essential to have a cooling and ventilation system to withdraw heat produced in the process. For common applications, both residential and industrial, a standard radiator and fan is mounted on the generator and works as the primary cooling system. Exhaust fumes emitted by a generator are just like exhaust from any other diesel or gasoline engine and contain highly toxic chemicals that need to be properly managed. Hence, it is essential to install an adequate exhaust system to dispose of the exhaust gases. Control panel. This is the user interface of the generator and contains provisions for electrical outlets and controls. Different manufacturers have varied features to offer in the control panels of their units, such as an electric start and shutdown, engine gauges, generator gauges, phase selector switch, frequency switch, and engine control switch. Main assembly or frame. All generators, portable or stationary, have customized housings that provide a structural base support. The frame also allows for the generator to be earthed for safety. This containments protect the generator from weather damage and corrosion. To keep a generator in good condition, it is best to have a frame to protect it. Thanks to the remarkable innovation of generators, numerous residences and businesses can consistently rely on dependable power. With a variety of options in terms of shapes and sizes, there's undoubtedly a generator that suits your needs perfectly. If you need reliable power...
Yeah, generator source, wonderful folks for that video. Again, just a very quick, brief overview on this system and its main parts. But I think when we talk about generator maintenance, and at least from our standpoint at Brookfield Service, there are 3 critical parts that, again, are either overlooked or usually, as Josh has experienced with, are the things that go wrong first. So as the video mentioned, everything from the engine, alternator, fuel system, voltage regulator, cooling exhaust, lubrications, keeps going all the way down the switchgear. There's obviously lots that can go wrong, but the main parts that we know that are in critical need and the critical parts to your generator are the alternator, the engine, and the transfer switch. Those 3 are really, if you don't have one of those working, just like the power triangle, your system will not work. First off, we have the engine. Just as the individual said, it's the source of input mechanical energy into the system. It's just like a car or truck engine. Obviously, typical large size is diesel. However, as Tevin was talking about, Vermont environmental regulations emphasize liquid propane and natural gas. Again, that is for the freshwater systems and source systems. You guys who are on the wastewater side, or who, again, other state entities, are able to invest in those diesel options. Again, just like in a regular car engine, pistons fire to spin the camshaft, and obviously the difference in the generator simulation is the car spins the drive shaft, where the end generator spins the rotor. This needs to be seen by a factory certified professional regularly. I don't know what cars you guys drive around here. I drive a Subaru just for these Vermont roads. I make sure I go bring it into Subaru because they give me the runaround of how important it is to go see a Subaru certified technician. I fall for it. I don't know. I think that it is very important, obviously, especially if you guys don't have, again, a factory certified technician for if you have a Generac or even a Cat. There are certain things that obviously will be overlooked or parts won't be able to be accessed. Most issues from generator arise from engine issues, which obviously makes a lot of sense, and we'll talk about it at the end when I go further into those common problems. Again, there are overhead valve models as well as non-overhead valve models. The main difference is obviously that those overhead valve models are much more expensive, but again, more compact, more durable, user-friendly, low emission, low noise. Those options are better if you have the budget and the affordability. The third part is the alternator, our second part, which I'll blow up this picture a little bit in a second. But it generates the electrical power current that runs through the system powered by the engine. I meant to bring, Jim, forgive me, I meant to bring the old AAA battery with the copper wire example to do the spinning. But ultimately, the electricity is just when charges of electrons move through a conductive wire or copper circuit. Obviously, the main parts of the alternator we recognize as the most critical parts in there. The stator, which is going to be the outer housing, which is coiled with copper wires and other electrical conductors, as well as the rotor, which is the moving part of the alternator, which is, again, rotating inside of the stator. That is a iron core with copper wires around it to induce electrical charge. And then again, as I mentioned, it spins inside the stator. The other important part here is the AVR, the automatic voltage regulator, which is going to maintain a constant voltage for your system. And obviously, if that were not to exist, your system wouldn't be able to power what it is firing to power due to the fact that the voltage would be all over the place. Pretty simple there. I again have a great picture here of this. You know, the shaft with the cooling fan, which sits inside the stator, spins like this to generate the charge and go up through the system, creating that circuit. Again, going to be very surface level here, one-on-one level, so I don't want to jump into the workings. But I did find this wonderful video that does a much better job than I would have done trying to explain how the alternator works. I'm having some weird issue with the video playback here, but there we go. Oh, okay.
Our world revolves around energy. At Doosan Portable Power, powering productivity is our business, and we specialize in building products that put power to work. Our mobile generators transform the stored energy in diesel fuel to electricity for daily use. Let's take a closer look. A generator engine converts diesel fuel to mechanical energy that rotates the crankshaft. As combustion occurs in each cylinder, energy transmits to the engine crankshaft, which generates mechanical power for the alternator. An alternator converts mechanical power into electrical energy in a process called magnetic induction. Magnetic induction occurs when a conductive material such as a copper wire passes through a magnetic field and voltage is produced. If the wire is connected in a complete circuit, the power can be transmitted. Alternators include two primary parts, a stator and a rotor. The stator contains copper coils wound into the alternator's outer casing. The rotor also has wire coils wrapped around an iron core, but unlike the stator, it is attached to the engine crankshaft so it rotates with the engine. When voltage passes through the rotor coils, it creates an electromagnetic field. As the rotor spins, its magnetic field cuts across the stator's conductive wire and generates voltage. Because the magnetic field builds and subsides, voltage fluctuates between positive and negative peaks, which is known as alternating current. The stronger the field, the higher the peaks. Ideally, voltage levels should be consistent so that constant power is provided when under load. To do so, an automatic voltage regulator, or AVR, adjusts the magnetic fields as needed. During heavy power demands, voltage decreases, causing the AVR to increase the magnetic field. Conversely, when power demands are low, the AVR tempers the field. Doosan mobile generators also include alternators with 6 coils wound into the stator. This provides 3 voltage sources or phases. Because each phase combines 2 coils of wire, the sources can be connected in series for high voltage applications or in parallel for low voltage needs. To simplify wire connections, Doosan mobile generators have a convenient selector switch. When an operator selects the desired voltage, the switch adjusts the connections and current flows through a protective device called a circuit breaker. If current exceeds capacity, the breaker halts the system, protecting the generator and connected equipment from potential damage. Once power reaches the connection panel, operators can attach power cables to the generator's terminal board, receptacle panel, or cam lock panel, transforming electrical energy into light, heat, or motion, providing the power we rely on every day.
So again, just a very, I think, much better job explaining the alternator than I could do for you guys. But again, the generator Josh can look at is a Generac, and I know you can do all that stuff that the Doosan video said, correct? Yep. Perfect. So we'll talk about that at the end when Josh goes through the portable connection and making sure you're up to snuff on that. But the third most important part, as I was talking about, is that transfer switch. Again, redirects power from the utility source to standby generator source. Automatic transfer switches automatically detect when the utility goes out and switch to standby. As you can imagine, manual transfer switches are required when power outage occurs. Does anyone in here have manual transfer switches? You guys do? Yep. Got a guest coming on here. Are you guys? Is it a pain to have to go around and go about that, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, I also after we talk about those main parts, want to jump into municipal water emergency power systems. A little bit about each style, each type, what you guys might have, pluses and minuses to each one. Obviously, there are many options. What's best for your facility? You got to ask yourself some questions, which we'll run through here. Towable versus standby, permanent standby, excuse me. There are obviously some pluses and minuses to each one. We'll talk about that further. And then obviously diesel versus natural gas. Again, I know some of you guys, at least from the clean water drinking side, it's not really an option. However, to that point, as long as you're adhering to the guidelines that I explained earlier.
Yeah, it's not stored.
Exactly. So there are still other options. So first and foremost, I want to jump into towable generators. The pros that are affordable, much more affordable than obviously a larger standby model, of course. They have limited contamination potential, obviously to the point that Ted was making, and they're movable as needed. So theoretically, as you guys know, you can move them to each site wherever is needed. But the big downside is that there's a risk that it won't be enough during emergency. If you have 5 stations that are down and you're relying on one portable, you know what they say about wishing on one hand, right? Also, we need to have the full staff trained to know how to use. Fortunately, our friend Josh is going to teach you guys how to hook up a rental or portable just in case something does happen. And I know that a lot of the smaller towns do have portables, so it made sense to bring that for you guys and have you learn. And also the issue Jim made to earlier, refueling. Let's say that it is a storm where power lines are down, or again, God bless Plainfield for having roads that are out. Making sure that your adequate fuel supply at each one of these towable generators is obviously something you have to keep in consideration, and they don't hold nearly as much fuel as obviously the diesel standbys or obviously the natural gas lines. Excuse me. But that brings us to the permanent standby generators. And some of those pros are obviously the natural gas option, which is a little more affordable than the diesel and the upfront costs. Scale to full load of site service. So I know a lot of guys, they rely on a portable. The portable isn't enough to supply adequate power source to their systems, which again is in a violation of one of the rules that Ted set forth. Big cons though are they're expensive. So it can be a large upfront cost, but obviously if you give us a call and work with Jim, there are ways that whether it be a used generator or ways that we can work with you to sell something that's a little more affordable than contracting out something brand new directly from working with Kohler, if you will. But again, to the contamination potential, there's an issue with diesel, which is why they're not allowed to be within the 200 feet radius storage of the well systems.
Just to be regarding that, I know that you guys, have budgets, et cetera, and sometimes a piece of equipment, generator goes down, and maybe it's obsolete, needs to be replaced. We have worked with several municipalities, an outside financing firm out of South Burlington that they finance the equipment for up to 10 years, kind of lease to own. They've been doing this in New York Town with some of the trucks and heavy equipment not unusual to do. They make available generators. So we've had some folks with some generators out that they didn't have the money in their budget to buy a new one, but they've gotten the option kind of a lease to own, so they can, at least, spread the payments up to 10 years to, avoid having to, come up with some kind of money for $100,000 generators to be replaced that may not, town may just may not have that kind of money available, but pay $2,000 a month to finance it over as much as 10 years. And you can pay it off sooner if you want, it's in the next year budget to pay it off, you can do that. You don't necessarily have to be dead in the water because there's not enough funds available.
It's a great point, Jim. Oh yeah.
Question, would you be able to that through the state pretty well, and like the lawn farm?
Yeah, you can go through that.
They also have that option to improve.
Get the water investment division law. That's something you wanna look at, yeah, they
Potentially
can
more than one chamber.
contact someone in there, they can, say what you wanna do, and they can go through that. He was an operator as well.
Couple options.
Yeah, definitely, definitely other options. And there's different types of things too, like if you have, marginalized communities or installation of that opens up more opportunities. I don't know the specifics of those, but like I said, then, water investment division.
Yeah, and I mean, great. Jim makes a great point. It's better to look, and Ted too. Better to look and ask and figure something out than it is to assume that the money is non-existent. So again, there are always options to consider. But obviously, it's our standpoint that we do recommend the site services to have a permanent standby. It makes sense. Again, there are funding options, and when you weigh the pros and cons, permanent standbys do just make more sense. Now, going into diesel versus if you remember having that, but diesel versus natural gas, non-diesel options. I want to look at some pros and cons of each one of them because there's some definite, options when a lot of people just assume that diesel is the one of the better options in terms of power output, fuel efficiency. But obviously, as I mentioned, pros: fuel efficiency. Diesel has a high energy output when you compare it to other liquid fuel sources. Steady and secure power supply. So obviously during a disaster, you don't have to worry about natural gas lines being disrupted or worrying about infrastructure in cases of emergency. As Jim was mentioning, most of these diesel tanks, depending on what you are rated for level, have to have at least a 72-hour tank for the level 1 facilities, and obviously for level 2, have the day tanks that are rated for, if I'm not mistaken, 8 hours. We also have a longer lifespan, as you guys know. Diesel engines have a much longer lifespan due to a lot of factors, but mainly the lubricating factors of the diesel itself. But obviously, it's safer than natural gas, as is less flammable, and you don't have a spark plug. You have the glow plug there. But the cons, the high upfront costs are one of the main things that turn people away from diesel. What turns me away from a diesel engine for my car. Obviously, the older models are very noisy, and as we'll talk about again, the high pollution concern is something that is creating, or at least right now, an advocacy for the liquid propane or natural gas options. Now, speaking to that, natural gas, liquid propane, cleaner than diesel, no odor, readily available in many municipalities. Thank goodness for the state of Vermont, and no risk to fuel deterioration. As Jim was mentioning, you don't have to do the testing as regularly. Obviously, the cons: relying on infrastructure. As I just mentioned in the last slide, God bless. Again, town of Plainfield. I hate to use you as an example. It's just so relevant.
I just live there.
Recency. Well, it's okay. We don't deal with it then. Perfect.
The operator's plenty busy.
But even in Plainfield, unfortunately, the towns rely on infrastructure. So if a natural gas line were to be compromised, your system is not going to be running. They are more expensive to run when you look at per hour costs. Non-renewable natural gas is a non-renewable source, and obviously with the availability of biodiesel, that's going to be something that is hopefully more expanded in the next 20 to 30 years. And obviously, as mentioned, higher costs in the long run when it comes to maintenance.
There's one other thing that is worth mentioning, and we seem to be seeing it more and more as we get jobs. We just finished a job in Williamstown for a 100 kW generator. Gas companies are becoming very difficult to deal with. There's a lot of consolidation going on in that industry. Most recently, Dead River purchased Owens Blue Company. And so as these guys get bigger, suburban, urban, getting into those type of challenges, you know, be aware they're out there. We're gonna do, with Bennington, we're putting in fuel tanks, ourselves. The same reason the phosphorus is, you know, off the chart to use the fuel company. It's becoming more and more of a situation. So as you deal with propane, you know, and if your fuel company is one of those that is, you know, either going to make it very hard on you in terms of logistics getting things done, or they're going to, you know, really supercharge you in terms of the price. We can be an alternative to get that done and make it more of a turnkey scenario, so you don't need to become held prisoner by the fuel company. So just, you know, keep that in the back of your mind. I mean, Josh just got a text from residential, and the fuel company is charging $5,000 to put in the propane tank. Yes, everything was already stuffed up. All they did was put the tank in. They charged $5,000. I mean, so they're getting really obnoxious in terms of what they're charging versus what they charged maybe just 2 years ago. So as the consolidation continues in fuel companies, they are, I think you're gonna see pricing become more and more obnoxious.
Do you have access to like in-ground storage tanks?
Yes.
18,000, you've got vendors for that?
Yes.
Not here.
And especially to Jim's point, you know, with the labor shortage that's going to become more of a problem in Vermont before it gets better, the gas companies are obviously able to do less when it comes to that labor work, so they're going to charge more for it. And to Jim's point, they don't make much money on those, you know, the generator gas systems, because a lot of times the gas is sitting there, or propane is sitting there for so long that they're not making any. In the long run, the lifetime value of the customer isn't worth it to them in their eyes. But it doesn't mean that they should be pulling the leg of the customer, especially the end user.
One more comment on the
Sure.
propane issue. If you own your own tank, it's a big advantage. Because when we had the ice storm in '88, Albert became isolated. Well, all propane companies except for one are off the island. If they output on the island, couldn't fill anybody else's tanks unless you got permission for them. The other propane companies weren't giving them permission. So they were actually bringing in tanks and plumbing them into the system, disconnecting the other company's tanks. You know, that's a big asset. If you own the tank, you can have anybody fill it.
Right. And then you can shop for the best price.
Right, exactly.
That's that point. Don't let them bully you around either. So obviously, jumping into the generator maintenance side of things, we have the term for it. I'm sure you guys are familiar. Preventative maintenance, which is the services that ensure your generator set turns on when the power goes out. Pretty simple. And that includes everything from inspecting crucial parts, safety shutdown checks, replacing the oil filters and plugs, load tests. But it is so much more than that. And again, I know a lot of guys have their own maintenance team that handles things, does the replacing oil filters, plugs, inspects some things. But as we'll dive into, there are things that you need to have a licensed technician for, just to start off with the generator, but also for the transfer switch as well too. And I'm not going to go into all these, but I'm just going to very briefly go through all the things that our generator maintenance include, from everything from checking for leaks in the fuel system, checking the gas pressure, looking at the coolant system, as we'll explain, is one of the biggest issues. Checking the radiator core, checking fan belts, checking operation of everything, making sure you know, the coolant is flush if you need be, or replacing the coolant levels. Things again you might be able to do, but things that on the backside you're going to require a certified factory technician for. Lubricating system, engine electrical system, engine exhaust system, intake air system. I'm sure if you guys are handling your own generator maintenance, or if you have in the past, these are things that you might not have the checklist for, or might not be inspecting for, have the proper tools for. So again, just in the prevalence of why it's so important for us to come take a look at things, especially when it comes to, again, the coolant system. Obviously, we do the operation test. We make sure the enclosure is all taken care of, give it the TLC that it deserves. The software is a big one that Josh sees, that a lot of times software is not updated, and if something happens, a lot of times the system won't start right up because the software update is needed. and obviously creating more of a headache for you guys when you try to go in and figure out what's wrong, and it is a software system issue. The transfer switch, don't forget this transfer switch. Obviously, we are certified to be able to do all these things, which I know that you guys are really not supposed to be able to, or should not be doing, honestly, especially when it comes to cleaning, adjusting some relay fingers, checking the condition and main arcing contact, auxiliary contacts, lug connections, things that obviously require PPE and a licensed electrician to go in, or technician to go in and check. And obviously taking care of giving the TLC to the enclosure as well too. Again, only certified technicians can maintain this transfer switch. Do not work on the transfer switch yourself. It's very dangerous. Obviously, making the informed choice when providing it or choosing a service partner, due to the fact, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of those service guys, even some of the bigger companies like Cat, Cummins, Kinsley, they're not able to work on the transfer switch. They don't send a guy up that is able to, which requires you guys to then hire someone else, third party, and obviously go through the rigmarole of more scheduling and more hassle. And obviously, as I mentioned, our team is certified to work on all parts of our generator, including the switchgear. As we mentioned before, the importance of spare parts is signified in NFPA 110, Chapter 8, Section 2, Subsection 2. So we recommend always having on hand spare hoses and clamps, spare batteries, compatible tools, and obviously the manufacturer recommended backups. And as Josh alluded to in the back there are multiple things that are likely to break that you should have in mind, of course, making sure that those are, what was it, the fan belts and all that stuff, Josh, right? Thank you.
So, if you
Yes.
if we have a service contract with you guys carry that, or?
We do. The problem is that, and again, in our service contracts, we make sure that we do everything that's required, either by annual or biannual basis. But obviously, if we were to go up there assuming that everything is hunky-dory and you had a massive failure and we're not ready for that, that would require us to, again, incur more costs for you because we have to do the traveling and obviously the repair itself. As we mentioned, if whatever you guys can do yourself, if you guys are able to replace some hoses and do some of the things on the mechanical side of the engine that saves you money, especially for these small towns, please go for it. Put your hand in there. But obviously understand a lot of things on the generator system, like the transfer switch, things that by law are required to be tested monthly and tested biannually, we have to go in there for. So to your point, we recommend obviously using a trusted service contract for that biannual or annual visit, which we will have those spare parts, especially like Josh said, he's out in the field all the time. Josh, you explain a little more about that. You have spare parts in hand, but certain things you just don't have, obviously, correct?
Yeah, we'll carry all things, batteries, all the different block gears, everything like that. Once you get specified, like machine batteries, or I mean belts, hoses, stuff like that, we usually have to order. Do have some inventory on the real common ones, but most of them we can get within 3 to 5 days.
If you had a PM contract, if you will, say we had like a PM contract, but you could say, hey, we're gonna recommend you have these on site, so we're gonna order these in advance and make sure they're at your facility, so if we have a problem, it's all part of your inventory per the contract, right?
Well,
Somebody
so
knows
the
that.
spare part should be stored in your facility?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
okay.
saying, but per your contract, you're gonna say, hey, we recommend this, we're gonna order these, we're gonna move them on site, so if you call us in the middle of the night, they're there.
Right. Yeah, so now we're trying to do coolant maintenances every 3 to 5 years, just get people on that, so that we have a regular list of parts that, hey, you're at this 5-year mark. Next time we come to the service, we're gonna change all your belts, hoses, stuff like that, plus the coolant.
And then we're gonna restock your inventory, to make sure.
Right,
there's
yeah,
something.
you guys, there's quite a few sites that do have that stuff there. If they just don't, we're going there, reducing your parts and stuff you've already purchased.
And obviously, as you know, as us being a business, it saves money when it comes to you guys for any resourcing fees or any other fees that are incurred with, again, the cost of doing business, of course. So, and that's exactly it. To emergency, then yeah, it's good to have it on hand. And again, as mentioned with NFPA 8.2.2, it's required to have it on hand. So again, it shouldn't even be, again, even outside of the maintenance contract, it should be something that you guys are keeping in mind, obviously. I think that's very important. Josh will go into a little further too in his section, and when we go into the towable and the hands-on portion of this class. But some of the most common issues that we see. This picture, which actually serves as one of our background, and I think is the picture of the background right now. There's no one from Milton here, correct? Milton, Vermont? No one here? That's okay. I'm going to tell their story anyway. They unfortunately had a real serious situation. What do you got? The dog head here, the dog house here, Josh. they had mice completely in their entire generator. We'll look at pictures and videos, but it was unbelievable. They had, again, thousands of dollars of damage we'll talk about in a second, but things that just don't realize until they go wrong, until something needs to start up, and then you look inside it and like, jaw dropping. So coolant is, I believe, and again, we'll talk about the first most important issue, mice and animals, obviously, the block heater, wet stacking if you, again, are a diesel system, battery maintenance, and then again, diesel degradation if you're on a diesel unit. Coolant is 60% of all generator issues. Eric Parker, I believe, Jeremy, you said that you work with Eric. Eric is one of our senior techs. He's been there for what, Josh, 12 years as well? Almost as long as you? Yeah, so again, great experience with him. But when I'm out in the field with him, he always tells me, oh, it's going to be coolant issues, it's going to be hoses, it's going to be this. Usually he's right. We recommend, obviously, monitoring that temperature regularly, maintaining proper levels. Overfilling is better than underfilled, because if you don't have it underfilled, you have a high chance of burning out the elements. Flush every 4 years, and obviously a maximum 5. And then hoses and belts replaced every 7 years. Because cracks, leaks, and breaks, oh my, we can't tell you how many times that we've come to a place and the system it doesn't work just because there's a crack in in one of the hoses that was overlooked. You know, again, from to your point, maybe someone else who was on the service contract, or again, when it was the maintenance team looking these things over, that they assumed was okay, but again, 7 years later, was at fault. Yes?
Have you found at all that some of these generators are being wired with soy-based wiring?
And mice biting them? Josh, actually, soy-based wiring with mice attacking the casing?
Yeah, Johnny said it a few years ago when they started running all that. So that everything, there's been a bunch of recalls and stuff, so we've gone and changed the wiring and stuff like that.
That's a great point, though.
But still, if you put any kind of abatement in there, they make different sprays, like Central New Hampshire oil, undercoating, they make a peppermint spray now, you can spray out your wire movement, stuff like that.
Oh,
Just try to
okay.
keep them out of there.
I know a lot of vehicles have been using soy-based, and that's been an issue too.
Yeah, my dad has an Audi TT that's been sitting in our garage for too long that has mice all in the exhaust manifold, the engine bay. It's terrible. It's very, very sad. But yeah, mice are, as the next slide will show, a very big issue. But again, coolant is something that a lot of guys overlook. It's just one of the simpler things to maintain and make sure that you're flushing and maintaining properly. And again,
It's probably one of the things when we say to clients, it's time to do this, we get resistance, like,
yes.
no, it looks fine, everything looks fine, and then, they want to offset the potential cost of doing it. It's always a little bit of a battle to kind of convince somebody that, this is what the manufacturers recommend, if it happens at midnight, you're not, everyone's gonna be unhappy in terms of, going out, costs associated with that.
Yeah, there's a town up where we are, and they got in touch with me as their sales guy. They're like, hey, your guy Josh Gertie's, he's recommending that we flush our coolant. All we had was a high coolant temp. We didn't think we needed to do anything. Like, well, when's the last time you had your coolant? Well, 6 years ago, I think. I don't know. It's like, well, I mean, that could be part of the problem. And if you're not taking care of those things, then you're going to be calling your sales rep wondering why something's going wrong, and your tech recommends doing something. But again, it's just one of those things that again, whether it be the maintenance folk overlooking it or not adequate maintenance contracts, this again one of the critical issues that does go wrong. But again, as I think the story we mentioned here jumps right into it. Mice and animals, huge expense. The Milton, Vermont wastewater department is looking at $30,000 in this generator alone. They are considering actually putting in a new generator just because the cost of that to fix it, obviously. This, Josh, I think this was 19 years old around there, so it's approaching its 25-year lifespan for the town. So when you weigh out the cost of, all right, well, do we have to spend this amount of money to fix it? And if I'm not mistaken, they have one of our larger towables there, so to the tune of $3,000 a month for a rental there, combined with the cost of repair, these things add up very, very quickly. So to Josh's point, do whatever you can for abatement, which we recommend chicken wire, like especially very, very fine chicken wire, fine gauge, so it's very small holes so they can't get through, not the wide stuff for actual chickens. Check and clean out nests often, to the point of making sure that you guys, based on NFPA, are inspecting your systems weekly, and if not monthly. This should be part of the again, abatement remediation. Just putting a glove on and ripping out some nests, you might see a mouse or two, but they're not as bad as rats and won't bite half as bad. Invest in traps or other means. Again, Josh made a great point about the peppermint spray. I think I've heard stories of people using like regular dog and cat chewing spray because it has the metallic bitter flavor. Again, anything you can do to remediate and prevent mice from getting systems. And besides coolant, I know with air-cooled systems and for residential systems, mice are the number one, probably if not the number one issue, at least in the residential side, because as you can imagine, being close to houses and food there. This is a great video, if it'll play and give me the grace, that Josh took from the inside, or maybe it was you or Eric, from inside the Milton unit. So, pretty easy to see why it's not working, right? Pretty clear why we got the service call. Said, hey, something's wrong here. Again, just some more pictures here Josh took, which, again, just a real travesty. Look at all these, what is it, nuts here? Whatever, pine nut or whatever nut it is. Yeah, but honestly, unbelievable. And then to the point, so now, $30,000 repairs. How long has the rental been there, Josh? A month? That size, at least, we charge at least probably $4,000 a month for that bad boy. So again, let's say $40,000 at least, just because of the lack of care for mice and not taking adequate, measures to prevent that. The block heater is another significant issue Josh runs into all the time, especially over these larger systems. Your element's going to burn out sometime in the generator lifespan. Low coolant levels are also a huge cause for the element to burn out. So again, making sure you're running at proper coolant levels. Overfilled is always better than underfilled. And obviously the block heater is connected to the circuit breaker, which can blow if you have issues with the element, and there's issues with the block heater. So again, just incurring more expenses for less need. And obviously it sounds like there are a lot of people that are trying to figure out where a lot of funding sources are coming from already. Wet stacking. Wet stacking is the buildup of unburnt fuel in an engine and exhaust system. And again, as I mentioned, this only pertains to diesel units, so you folks that don't have diesel units can ignore this, but it's very important to understand if you do. It's obviously but those of you who do have diesel systems do understand wet stacking, and it's due to the engine not running at the optimal temperatures and the right ratio of airflow into the system. As you know, who have diesel engines, it's much more critical of the ratio for airflow than it is for gasoline engines. This reduces turbo and engine efficiency once you do build up this unburnt fuel, and over time this will cause engine erosion as well as exhaust parts erosion. Yes, Brad.
Kind of going off that, I know when it comes to equipment, at least, when you get over that 25 horsepower, I think it is class range, you start dealing with a diesel particulate filter. Are the newer generators, do they include the same type of system?
Only if you're running prime power. Still, we're at tier 2 for emissions. Though I just mobile is a tier 4 because it's mobile and it can be ran with prime power. So that has depth. That has your SCR, that has the GPS, all that kind of stuff.
So they have, some of them actually have that canister. And I know, correct me because I'm very layman's terms when it comes to this stuff, but like a lot of systems will have their generator set to auto exercise once a week. Remember, Waterbury's Tuesdays at 7:30 in the morning. And that's great, but if you're not going through and manually switching it to run under load, you're not achieving that heat to help burn some of that stuff out.
Right.
So, and if I'm jumping ahead on this, feel free to cut me
So
off.
that's the big thing, doing on the diesel units, if you can do a monthly load test, run your whole plant for an hour, help them burn out, that's the best thing for them.
And it's
If you're
a
just
real
running
cheap
no load all the time,
insurance.
they're gonna, yeah, exactly. But the new ones do have regeneration built into them. So that also plays a factor where you put a gas be farther away from the buildings, farther away from trees and stuff, because that extreme heat.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And NFPA 110 does have guidelines, which I'll jump into in a second here, about diesel load bank testing and obviously the avoiding of wet stacking. But obviously, as we just mentioned here, how to prevent. Load test at 75% rate of load, to what Josh was saying. Do that once per month. That will ensure that you're building those temperatures to burn off that unburnt fuel. We also recommend load bank testing at least every 2 to 3 years. NFPA 110 says for diesel engines it's every 3 years. And obviously that is dependent on the normal load for other for other non-level 1 systems, excuse me. Here's a great video of this here. And as you can see, a ton of that unburnt diesel fuel out of the exhaust form. Josh, where was that video taken?
Shelburne.
Shelburne, one of the nursing facilities, correct? Which one?
One of the
Residents,
residents.
okay, yeah. A quick comparative about load bank testing. It's critical to the lifespan of the unit, helps reduce the effects of wet stacking, and ensures your emergency power system is capable of a full load. So we hook it up to making sure that it is able to run 100% load for how long? 4 hours?
Oh, we step it up, so you run different tiers, but
There.
you basically run 2 hours under 100% load.
There you go. So 100% load for 2 hours. So again, just making sure that your diesel system can even run what it's rated for, which obviously after a period of time can deteriorate. The alternator, making sure the alternator is capable of maintaining the voltage needed. And FPA 110 says that load testing is not required every 36 months, for level 2 systems. However, if your system fails a monthly test, it is required. So again, just making sure that you are abiding by those regulations. Battery maintenance is, again, to what Jim explained, far too overlooked and too easy to overlook. And to that point, it's just too simple. You just test it, making sure you're at least looking at the control panel to make sure you're reading your correct voltage. Test monthly. I always, Josh, I'll still do invest in a multimeter or voltimeter. It's the same thing. And replace every 3 to 4 years, or as NFPA 110 says, immediately when any defects are noticed. And quickly, I have a link for you guys. We obviously will share this, but Harbor Freight, $8.99. You can't go wrong there. So hopefully, you guys have at least one of those hanging around the shop somewhere. Diesel degradation, as Jim alluded to before, is obviously another serious issue when it comes to diesel systems. I got another t-shirt here. How long does diesel fuel last under ideal conditions?
30 days.
6 months.
2 years.
9 months.
A year.
Who said a year?
A year.
I'm going to give it to this gentleman here. 6 to 12 months. You already got a shirt, so I was like, I got to spread the wealth a little bit. But so diesel degradation, it only takes 6 to 12 months for diesel to degrade, and especially as we're going to talk about here with the ultra low sulfur emissions, this is even worse just because of, again, the fact that it introduces microbes into the environment. So further on this, the cause of diesel degradation, one of the main causes is called diurnal breathing. Water gets into the tank when temperatures cool at night, causing the fuel to condense, bringing water into the system, air into the system, and obviously air is got a good chunk of water in it percentage-wise, which obviously condenses into the tank. Ultra low sulfur diesel offers little microbial protection, as we were talking about with different tiers, environmental protections. The old way was a little better, however, obviously, as we're getting into these biofuels and the more clean burning diesel engines, we might see a resurgence of these diesel engines. And as we can see here from NFPA 110, tanks will be sized to the fuels consumed within the storage life. Provisions shall be made to remediate any contaminated or stale fuel, and diesel fuel shall be tested for degradation no less than twice annually. And as Jim was mentioning, a lot of times these poor nursing homes, to abide by the systems, end up having to spend a lot of money in the long run to get these the fuel polishing and to pump new fuel in. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Brockhausen now, where we're going to talk very shortly about some of the Delta 480 voltage systems that I know a lot of the older facilities have, as well as some tips on reducing the size of your generator.
Thanks. Absolutely. So up front, I'm not an electrician. Ryan Aiken, our chief installer, was going to do this part, but he's busy installing a generator in Hardwick right now at the school. But I do want to share what we found, and just kind of a concern that you may want to investigate at your plants. So many of the plants that we come across have been built in the 70s. And we had 2 instances over the last year, both in Bristol and a couple months ago in Poultney, where they have a 480 delta system, but it's the oldest system, so there's no neutral coming from the utility, okay? So that sets up a potential problem in that if there's a short to ground, it's not detected. There is, go to the next slide. This is a definition of a voltage to ground is an important issue. For example, a single phase system, the voltage is 120 volt from an ungrounded phase conductor to ground. For underground systems, the greatest voltage between the given conductor and other circuit conductors is also phase to ground. On a 480 three-phase, three-wire underground delta system, the phase-to-phase voltage is 480 volt. Based on the definition, this is also phase to ground voltage for this system. This vital information must be applied when selecting circuit breakers for underground systems. The circuit breakers must be typically a straight voltage rating of 480 as opposed to the 480 277, which is probably what is being installed in these places because that's the most common breaker that people are accustomed to. It's very rare that we run into a 480, a straight 480 volt breaker. If you have this type of system, you have to have ground detection equipment, okay? And this is something that we have not come across, finding any ground detection phase system. So it's almost non-existent here in Vermont. Next one. Marking equipment, you know, making sure that it's marked for 480 volts, that is fairly common. It does give you a notification of the system. The issue that we came across, next slide please. The issue that we came across is that in the case of Bristol, for instance, they had a motor that kept shorting out, and they couldn't figure it out because the breaker never popped, okay? Because the breaker wasn't rated for straight 480. And there is the possibility, right, if you go phase to phase, that your equipment is going to be energized, meaning if you touch it, you're going to get electrocuted. So we brought an engineer in both cases to review what's going on. And in both cases, we worked with Green Mountain Power, because Green Mountain Power says, no, this has got to be changed to, you know, bring a neutral into the system to make it safe. So in both cases, in Bristol, we ended up changing the system. In Pulteney, we ended up changing the system and bringing in the proper wiring with Green Mountain Power with neutrals. So what GMP is saying that this was very common in the 70s. They did it because it cost a little less money to bring the wire in, of course. The wire that we had in Pulteney that was underground was just rubber, and then the wires were insulated with cloth, and they've been buried there for close to 50 years. And to the point, to Oliver's little thing, you know, these systems are not meant to last, you know, 50 years. You know, they're meant to be upgraded over time. The problem that we see in Vermont with the utilities is the green energy scenario, right? There's been a lot of emphasis on that, right? And there's legislation that they have to get to so green. So where is their capital expenses going? It's all going into that. You know, we all see Green Mountain Power solar fields, the wind turbines that they put up, you know, 10 years ago, and they'd like to put up more, but the state has basically said no more of that. They're doing more with hydro dams because we work with them putting generators on those hydro dams to make sure the controls work. So there's the capital investments is going, you know, is being directed in that direction. The problem is, you know, and you take, you know, the co-ops like Washington Electric or Vermont Co-op and some of the towns that still do their own electricity like Hardwick and Stowe, et cetera, is the transformers that are on those poles probably put in the 60s and 70s, you know. I've seen them look like total rust cans, some of them that are out there. So, and of course the lines, like they were talking about Pacific Gas and Electric, you know, that hold the lines, these infrastructure things are not being changed, which is why Vermont ranks so poorly in grid reliability. Look, we're a small state with 600,000 souls. To do that upgrade that they're talking about is, you know, billions of dollars. And I don't think the state or the utilities, even Green Mountain Power, can make those changes on a very fast basis. So if you have a concern that you know you have 480 Delta and you know it's an old system, you can have, you know, a knowledgeable electrician maybe check it out for you, or we could come in and check it out for you at no charge. You may want to call Green Mountain Power in, or if you're working with one of the co-ops in towns, and just say, hey, what's going on? Is there a neutral coming in from this service, or is this just straight 3 wires that are 3-phase? And if it is, I would strongly suggest that you think about changing that service out. We can do it in terms of working with your utility along with them in terms of doing the connections. Obviously, they're going to do the poles, but they will not do the wire in many cases. So we had to do, for instance, Pulteney was a long pull, so we ended up doing all the trenching work for GMP and did the connections, you know, to the building. Same thing with Bristol. That was actually overhead, wasn't even underground, but they had the same problem. They had just 480 Delta, 3 wires, no neutral. So, so GMP is very happy to get those systems changed over because they know the potential problems that it could have. So, you know, just the word out there, if you feel you or think you might have one of these systems, give us a call, give your electrical utility a call, and just have them check it out for you. And you may want to strongly consider having it upgraded so that you have a neutral being pulled in there to avoid potential problems with equipment and potentially life safety issues in your plant. So I'll leave you with that. I was surprised that we found 2 in less than a year. But both systems were fairly old, and that's one of the consequences that we ran into. So, any questions?
Jim, just before I go, before you, I also want to talk about the reducing the size of the generator, the soft start versus hard start.
Yeah. With generators, and I think I touched on this a little bit. I'm sure many of you have VFDs in your plants. The recommendation from us is if you don't, you know, get them. We work with Pioneer Motor out of South Burlington to install VFDs with us. The rationale is the motor's going to last longer, but number 2, you don't get that surge inrush current, and that enables, if you have a generator, to have a generator that's not sized just because of the surge. So you can get a smaller generator, and it'll cost you less, and it'll cost you less to operate over the long term, and your motor will last longer. So, you know, again, I'm sure we're running to more and more facilities that have the VFDs already installed, and we just encourage you to continue to do that.
Great. Now, before we get up for bathroom break, I'm gonna just let you guys know, next part is gonna be the hands-on lesson. Josh is gonna talk a little bit about, obviously, well, what he wants to talk about, some of the overview of what his lesson is gonna be about with the generator knowledge. But obviously we have the towable outside that we're gonna show you how to hook up, but as well as go through some, as mentioned here, just some of the things that Josh looks for when he's out on a service call, some of the things that might go overlooked, and obviously ways to go about that. Brad.
Everybody loves the guy who asks a question right before the break, so I'm gonna do it.
That's all right.
So if you got back to the storage tanks for propane.
Yes.
If you own your own tanks, and you were talking about some of the excavating work and stuff that the gas companies aren't doing anymore as much. Can you speak at all to tank 30 years old, maybe it's time to dig it up and do a little analysis on what the state of the tank is.
Yeah, so we, as Brookfield Service, don't do it, we use our subcontractor, Market Ministry to do that type of work. And, yeah, so if you have a real old tank, yeah, you probably need to swap it out, that'll be obvious. You know, Mark can do a technical review of the tank. It's something the fuel company who's doing your service, they will do that.
Okay.
They just, at this point, you know, and I think it more and more, this is all post-COVID scenario and continued consolidation. It is really hard, we are all challenged to have to hire people, quality people. And, the fuel companies are in the same boat. And, so their qualified people are being stretched further and further. And so things that, you know, they used to do in terms of installing the actual fuel lines and installing tanks, you know, excavating, they're just trying to get away from that as fast as possible. And if they do it, they're gonna really supercharge it. They're gonna make you pay. Yeah.
So if you do own your tank and you know that it hasn't been touched and you just kind of forget about it and fill it, and it's aging, it might be worth thinking about whether you want to do some PM on that tank and make sure, you know, those anode bags that provide the protection from your tank rotting out, it's just one little wire that goes to the tank, so it's just a matter of time before that wire fails and now your tank is getting destroyed. So just another thing to think about.
Josh, by the way, where's this beautiful picture taken? Wisconsin, right? Fuller Factory?
Blue Star Factory.
Blue Star Factory? You look like a good little schoolboy there, ready to,
Yeah, all the employees are staring at me.
I took the picture, I says, attendant.
Also, before you guys go with the bathroom break, just to let you know, obviously there wasn't everyone that showed up today, which is totally fine, but I do not want to see any of these gift bags here, so please take them to other operators you have at the station, take them to your boss, your chief operator, make them happy. I also have some hats here if you want to take them back home and glasses, so please take all that stuff. I implore you. We have lunch coming in about an hour, so take 10 minutes now for another little bio break, and then Josh will get started outside. We'll gather around the generator outside and get started out there. Thank you all very much.